In the quiet darkness of space, long after humanity had learned to cross the stars, Earth had become known not for conquest, but for peace. People remembered how humans had once fought countless wars among themselves. The pain of history had taught them something no other species had ever understood so deeply. The real power was not in destroying worlds, but in saving them. The Terran Peace Corps was the result of that lesson. It was a group made of diplomats, scientists, and officers trained to bring calm where chaos ruled. Their mission was simple but dangerous: travel across galaxies, speak for peace, and stand between civilizations that could destroy each other in a heartbeat. When a distant star system called Draxion fell into conflict, the Peace Corps was sent to help. Two powerful alien empires had been fighting for decades over mineral-rich planets on the edge of their borders. Each side accused the other of trespass and sabotage. Entire colonies were destroyed, fleets clashed in orbit, and innocent lives were lost. The Galactic Council had failed to end it, so they called upon the humans, the peacemakers of the New Age. Leading the mission was a calm and disciplined human officer, known across many worlds for her ability to stop wars with only her words. Her reputation was built not on strength but on her fairness. She had faced warlords, smugglers, and rulers blinded by pride, yet she always found a path to understanding. Even among alien diplomats, her presence brought quiet respect. When the human peace team arrived in the Draxion system, the atmosphere was tense. Their ship glided slowly into the neutral orbit station built for negotiations. The corridors were lined with representatives of both warring empires, each suspicious, each watching the humans with uncertain eyes. For many of them, this was the first time seeing a human up close. The humans greeted everyone with calm smiles and polite gestures. They carried no weapons, wore no armor, only their insignia of peace, a small silver emblem shaped like an open hand. They believed trust had to be given before it could be received. For weeks, the talks continued. The human team listened more than they spoke. They studied the history of the war, the motives of both sides, and the hidden fears that kept the conflict alive. It was not just about land or resources, it was about pride, old grudges, and misunderstanding. Slowly, one conversation at a time, the humans began to break through. They spoke of Earth's own violent past and how their people had once stood on the edge of extinction. They explained how only through unity and respect had they survived. Their words carried the weight of truth. For the first time in years, the two alien factions agreed to pause their fighting. A fragile truce was born. Fleets withdrew from battle zones and supplies began to reach starving colonies again. The humans worked tirelessly to maintain that balance. To them, every life, human or alien, was precious. Days turned into weeks and hope began to grow. The Galactic Council praised the human mission, calling it a shining example of diplomacy. Even the media across the stars began reporting the miracle of Draxion. Some said that if humans could make enemies talk, maybe peace across the galaxy was truly possible. But not everyone welcomed that hope. Within one of the alien governments, a hidden faction viewed humanity as a threat. They whispered in secret halls that humans were not peacekeepers but manipulators, that their kindness was a mask-hiding ambition. They feared that if the galaxy continued to admire humans, their own influence would weaken. So they made a plan, a dark one. They would turn the tide by creating a false story. They claimed they had proof that the human team was secretly working for Earth's military. They said the Peace Corps had been gathering intelligence to help humans control the trade routes of Draxion. The accusation spread quickly through military channels and government circles. The human team knew nothing about it. They continued their work, believing they were close to signing a lasting peace agreement. Every night they looked at the stars outside the station and felt a quiet sense of purpose. On the day of the signing ceremony, the great hall of the neutral station was filled with light. Flags of all species hung side by side. Music played softly in the background. The human envoy walked to the center of the hall with a calm expression. They were ready to mark the day as a turning point in galactic history. But before the ceremony could begin, alarms echoed through the hall. The music stopped. Armed soldiers from one of the alien factions stormed into the room. Their leader announced that the humans were under arrest. The Peacekeeper stepped forward and asked for an explanation. The only answer she received was a cold voice claiming that Earth had betrayed the trust of the galaxy. No evidence was shown. No questions were allowed. The humans tried to reason with them, but their words were drowned out by shouts of anger and fear. The Galactic Council tried to intervene through communication channels, but it was too late. The alien faction had already made their decision. They believed or pretended to believe that humanity had crossed the line. The Peacekeeper and her small team were taken into custody. The other delegates protested, but the soldiers forced them out of the room. The humans were accused of being spies. Their mission declared a lie. The Peacekeeper tried to explain that her team had come only to save lives, not take sides. But her words fell on deaf ears. For 2 days, the galaxy waited for answers. Messages from Earth flooded the council chambers, demanding that their people be released. The humans' allies begged for calm, fearing that any rash move could lead to disaster. But deep down, everyone knew something had gone terribly wrong. In those tense hours, hope faded into silence. The Peacekeeper remained calm, even in captivity. She believed that truth would rise above lies. She believed that reason would win. She told her guards that humanity did not hate them, and that one day they would see the mistake. Her courage and calmness impressed even those who watched her through surveillance screens. But her enemies were not moved by honor. They wanted a message, a warning to the rest of the galaxy not to let humans interfere again. And so, in a cold and cruel decision, they ordered her execution. The event was broadcast across interstellar networks. Billions of beings across the stars watched in disbelief as the woman who had come to bring peace was silenced forever. The image spread faster than any weapon could travel. On Earth, people gathered in front of screens in stunned silence. The cities went quiet. No one spoke. No one moved. In that stillness, something ancient and powerful awakened in the hearts of humankind. Not rage without reason, but a burning promise. A promise that peace would never again be mistaken for weakness. At that moment, every human on Earth knew what was coming next. Not revenge, but justice. Not hatred, but resolve. The stars had witnessed the execution of peace itself, and the world that once vowed never to fight again began to prepare for war. The mission that started with hope had ended in tragedy, but it lit a fire that no empire could ever put out. Humanity had sent a messenger of peace into the stars. Now they would send something else, something the galaxy had not seen in centuries, something forged from unity, loss, and unbreakable will. And when those ships would rise from Earth's orbit, the universe would remember the day peace was betrayed and what humanity did next. The news of the Peacekeeper's death spread like a storm through the galaxy. Every network, every communication channel, every world repeated the same shocking broadcast again and again. The galaxy had seen wars before, but this was different. This was an execution carried out in cold blood against a person who had come to bring peace. No one could believe it had really happened. On Earth, people stood in silence for hours. The streets were filled with citizens who couldn't speak, only staring at the giant screens showing her final moments. The silence was heavier than thunder. It was not just grief, it was disbelief mixed with sorrow. Across continents, people lit candles, held hands, and whispered prayers. They could not understand how someone who carried no weapon, who had gone only to stop a war, could be treated like an enemy. The world governments came together in an emergency meeting. Leaders from every nation joined the session, their faces pale and grave. They watched the footage again, and no one looked away. When the video ended, the room remained still. Finally, one leader stood and said quietly, "They didn't just kill one of us. They killed peace." The president of the Terran Union addressed the planet that evening. His face was calm, but his eyes held something fierce behind them. The speech was short, but every word was remembered. He said, "We reached out with open hands. They answered with cruelty. We do not seek war, but we will not ignore what has been done. Earth will act." The galaxy had always seen humans as kind, but harmless. They thought of Earth as a world that had left war behind, a species that preferred talking to fighting. But now the galaxy began to wonder what would happen if that kindness turned into determination. Across Earth, things began to move. The once quiet shipyards along the moon's surface came alive with light. In the vast orbital docks around Mars, engineers returned to their stations. Factories that had been silent for decades reopened. Machines built for peace were now repurposed for defense. Yet this was not chaos. It was not rage. It was order. A calm, united movement that came from the deepest part of humanity's heart. In the space between Earth and Mars, fleets of silver-gray warships began to form. These ships had been built not for invasion but as guardians of peace. But now they would serve a new purpose, to demand justice. The fleets were commanded by calm officers who had once trained to keep peace among the stars. Now they stood ready to protect it through strength. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council tried to stop the situation from getting worse. Messages flooded into Earth's channels urging patience and restraint. Many alien leaders were terrified of what was coming. They had seen what humans were capable of when united. Some tried to offer apologies, others denied any part in the crime. But Earth did not respond. Its skies remained silent and its fleets continued to gather. The alien faction responsible for the execution began to realize the scale of what they had done. At first, they celebrated their act as a victory, claiming they had protected their sovereignty. But as reports came in of human fleets leaving the Sol system, their leaders began to feel the weight of their mistake. Their own citizens started to question them. Many of their soldiers refused orders, saying that executing a peace envoy was dishonorable, but the leaders doubled down, releasing false reports that the humans had been spies and that Earth was preparing to invade. Their lies could no longer hide the truth, but fear made them desperate. Back on Earth, every human heart carried the same silent promise: to bring justice, not revenge. The Peacekeeper's story became a symbol. Artists painted her face on city walls. Children learned her name in schools. Every family, every worker, every soldier knew that her sacrifice had changed everything. Humanity would not remain silent anymore. In the command centers of the Terran Defense Fleet, orders were clear but measured. The mission was not destruction. The mission was to hold those responsible accountable, and to make sure no one would ever dare harm a human peacekeeper again. As the fleets prepared to launch, something remarkable happened. People from other species, scientists, traders, and diplomats who had lived among humans, sent messages of support. They said, "We have seen what humans truly are. We believe in your justice." Some even volunteered to help. The galaxy was beginning to realize that this was not about one person. It was about what was right. When the first Terran ships left orbit, the sight was unforgettable. Hundreds of vessels rose silently through the clouds, their engines glowing like blue stars. On every continent, people looked up at the night sky and watched them go. There was no cheering, no noise. Only pride and sorrow mixed together in a quiet farewell. Each ship carried the same emblem: the silver open hand of peace. It was not erased or replaced with a symbol of war. The humans wanted everyone to remember what this was truly about. They were not marching into the stars as conquerors. They were going as protectors of the very peace that had been betrayed. The alien faction that had ordered the execution began to panic. They tried to reach out to the Galactic Council for protection. They said that Earth was planning to destroy their civilization. But by then, few believed them. Too many had seen the truth with their own eyes. Too many had watched the broadcast that showed a human standing calmly before her captors, refusing to hate them even in her final moments. When the human fleets approached the outer borders of their space, the stars around their worlds lit up with signals. Every satellite, every listening post could detect the human presence. But there were no demands, no threats. Only a single message was transmitted in a calm voice. It said, "You took one life to silence peace. We come to speak for her now." Even those who hated humanity felt the chill in those words. They were not loud or violent. They were heavy with purpose. Inside the human fleet, soldiers spoke quietly among themselves. They were not excited. None of them wanted war. Many of them had joined the service to prevent such things. But now they understood that sometimes peace must be defended by strength. Some of the alien soldiers stationed at border outposts sent messages to their families, afraid of what was coming. They had seen the numbers. They knew that the Terran fleets outmatched them not just in technology but in unity. They began to evacuate civilians, fearing that battle was inevitable. The leaders of the alien faction made one final attempt to twist the story. They held a press conference on their capital world, declaring that the human fleet was an invasion force, but their own people no longer believed them. Protests began to fill their cities. Civilians demanded the truth. They wanted to know why their leaders had provoked the humans. And somewhere deep in the core of their government, one of the officers who had once guarded the Peacekeeper could not bear the guilt anymore. He leaked the recordings of her final hours, how she had spoken gently to her captors, how she had told them that she forgave them. The recordings spread faster than anyone could stop them. When Earth received the footage, the world fell silent again. People listened to her voice, calm and brave, echoing through the networks. "If I die," she had said, "let it not be for hatred. Let it remind you that peace is worth protecting." Those words reached every corner of Earth and beyond. They reminded everyone that humanity's strength did not come from weapons. It came from the courage to protect what mattered most. As the fleets neared their destination, there was no joy, no hunger for battle, only a deep, shared promise that her words would not fade into silence. The betrayal that had begun with lies and fear had now awakened something unstoppable. The galaxy watched in suspense as the human fleet crossed into enemy space. No one knew what would happen next. But one thing was certain: the age when humanity remained silent in the face of injustice was over. The execution of one peacekeeper had changed the course of the stars forever, and the ones who had betrayed peace were about to face the full weight of what they had unleashed. The skies above Earth glowed brighter than they had in decades. The orbits were alive with movement, ships launching, transports rising, satellites aligning. Yet in the middle of all that activity, there was no shouting, no cheering, no wild emotion. There was only quiet focus. Humanity was preparing for something it had never done before, a war not born of greed but of justice. Inside the Terran Command Center, the world's best minds were gathered. Generals, scientists, diplomats, and engineers, all sitting together under one roof. For once, there were no arguments between nations, no competition for power. Earth was one voice, one purpose. The air inside the command chamber was heavy, not with fear, but with resolve. The message from the alien faction still echoed in their records, the false claim that the Peacekeeper had been a spy. But humanity had already seen the truth. The footage of her calm final moments had spread everywhere. It reminded everyone that she had represented not a single government, but the heart of all humankind. Across cities, people worked day and night. Engineers built ships faster than ever. Scientists fine-tuned long-range shields and communication systems. Workers volunteered for shifts without sleep. Every person, from farmers to technicians, gave something. Humanity had learned from history that true power came not from a single weapon, but from unity. In schools, teachers told children the story of the Peacekeeper. They spoke not with anger, but with pride. They told them that peace was something humans would always fight to protect, no matter the cost. The children listened wide-eyed, realizing they were living through a moment that would be written in the pages of history. Back at the spaceports, the fleet was taking shape. Hundreds of warships now stood ready, lined like silent guardians in orbit. Their hulls reflected the sunlight in silver arcs that could be seen even from the surface. Every ship carried the same symbol, a silver open hand, the mark of peace that humanity refused to abandon. In the command decks of these ships, men and women went through their routines calmly. They didn't speak of revenge. They spoke of duty. One pilot adjusted his flight controls, whispering that this mission wasn't about destroying but about ending the cycle of betrayal. Another officer checked the navigation system and said quietly, "We're going to show them what peace looks like when it stands tall." Meanwhile, the leaders of the Galactic Council were growing more nervous each day. They sent envoys to Earth begging them to wait, to let diplomacy continue. But the humans replied with silence, not because they ignored them, but because words had already failed once. They would not let empty promises replace justice again. The alien faction responsible for the execution grew desperate. They fortified their borders, called back their fleets, and tried to hide behind the Council's protection. But no shield could hide guilt. The galaxy had seen their crime. Other civilizations began cutting ties with them, refusing to trade or cooperate. Their own people protested in the streets, demanding that the leaders admit the truth. While this unrest spread, humanity continued preparing, but not for total destruction. Their goal was clear: reach the faction's world, confront their leadership, and bring them to trial before the galaxy. Every ship's order was precise: no harm to civilians, no unnecessary strikes. The humans wanted to show the galaxy that strength could exist without cruelty. Earth's president once again appeared on the broadcast networks. His words were calm, but every syllable carried weight. He said, "We have no hatred for the innocent. We will not strike the helpless, but those who chose to kill a voice of peace will answer to the world." Those words echoed through space, carried by every signal beacon, translated into every known tongue. Even the enemies who had once mocked humanity for being too emotional now felt something unfamiliar. Fear mixed with respect. As the fleets left orbit, people across Earth watched them disappear into the blackness of space. Some cried softly, others stood still with hands over their hearts. No one felt joy, only a deep collective determination. They knew that these ships were not going to conquer but to protect something sacred. In the depths of space, the journey began. The human ships traveled in perfect formation, engines glowing faint blue like a trail of stars moving together. Inside the main command vessel, officers studied maps of alien systems and reviewed peaceful communication protocols one last time. They still hoped the enemy might surrender without bloodshed, but as they approached the border of alien space, the first transmissions arrived, angry messages from the faction's military, ordering them to turn back or face destruction. The human commander listened to the threats, his face steady. Then he replied with only one sentence. "We are not here to destroy. We are here to end what you began." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Hours later, human sensors detected enemy fleets gathering ahead. Ships armed with heavy weapons filled the scanners. The alien commanders were terrified but proud. They believed that humans known for peace would not dare attack. They thought Earth's compassion was weakness. They were wrong. The first wave of human ships moved forward, not firing blindly, but targeting only the enemy's weapon systems. Their strikes were clean and controlled, disabling engines and shields without killing the crews. The alien fleets, shocked by the precision, couldn't understand what was happening. Within minutes, entire formations were immobilized. Human ships surrounded them, transmitting one clear message: stand down. No harm will come to those who surrender. The alien soldiers hesitated. They had been told that humans were monsters pretending to be kind. But now, facing the calm precision of Earth's fleets, they began to doubt their leaders. Some shut down their systems and surrendered. Others fled back toward their capital, warning their commanders that humanity was unstoppable. Not because of brutality, but because of discipline. In every battle, human forces followed the same pattern: swift, calculated, and restrained. They destroyed no cities, harmed no civilians, and refused to fire upon retreating ships. The galaxy watched in astonishment. This was not war as anyone had known it. This was justice shaped by compassion. The broadcasts of these encounters spread quickly. Other alien civilizations began speaking publicly in support of Earth. They called it the War for Peace, a campaign not for conquest, but for principle. Even the Galactic Council, once hesitant, started to recognize the legitimacy of humanity's mission. Within a week, the alien faction's outer defenses collapsed. Their fleets were disabled or surrendered. The human armadas advanced closer to the central world where the leaders who had ordered the execution still hid. Panic filled their cities. Some tried to flee, others begged for negotiation. But humanity moved forward steadily, giving them one final chance to surrender peacefully. During this time, the human commanders sent out a final message to the galaxy, transmitted across all frequencies. The message was simple: we will not destroy what peace built. We will only remove those who betrayed it. The alien population, hearing that, began to revolt against their own rulers. Crowds filled the streets demanding surrender. Soldiers refused to fight. The people realized that humanity's goal was not revenge. It was to end the cycle of lies and violence. Finally, after endless silence from their capital, the faction's leaders sent a message requesting to meet. The human fleet stopped advancing. The leaders claimed they were ready to talk. But the galaxy had already seen too much to believe in their words easily. Back on Earth, the people waited for news. Families gathered around screens, hoping that this time peace would return without more loss. They had endured pain and fear, but through it all they never lost faith in what they stood for. Humanity had shown that even in anger, it could remain guided by purpose and conscience. As the human fleet hovered near the alien capital, the commanders looked out at the glowing world below. They knew that the hardest part was not the battles they were over. The hardest part was what came next, bringing justice without becoming what they had fought against. For that reason, they refused to fire. They waited for the alien leaders to step forward and face judgment before the entire galaxy. And in that waiting, a strange calm filled the stars. Humanity had proven its power, but more than that, It had proven its control. Every species that watched from afar learned something that day. They saw that the same humans who once reached for peace with open hands could also protect that peace with unshakable strength. The Earth's response was not fury. It was balance. Not blind rage, but rightful action. The galaxy would never forget how a single act of betrayal awakened the might of an entire world. And though the war was not yet over, everyone could sense it. The end was near and justice was coming. The human fleet waited in orbit above the alien homeworld, their engines silent, their lights dimmed. The planet below shimmered with blue oceans and golden cities, glowing softly against the darkness of space. From a distance, it looked peaceful, so peaceful that no one would imagine the fear spreading through its streets. The alien government that had ordered the execution was now trapped by its own lies. Their armies were broken, their fleets disabled, and their citizens no longer trusted them. But instead of surrendering with honor, the leaders hid inside their fortified chambers, sending out desperate messages to the Galactic Council. They called for protection, claiming that Earth had come to destroy them. But the galaxy had already seen the truth. Humanity had not come to destroy. It had come to bring justice. Inside the command deck of the lead Terran vessel, the atmosphere was calm but tense. Officers watched the readings on their consoles, tracking every signal coming from the planet. They could see thousands of civilians marching in protest, demanding that their own rulers surrender. It was clear that the people no longer believed the lies. The commander stood at the front of the room, looking out at the blue and gold planet through the viewing screen. He knew the next step would decide everything. The galaxy was watching. Billions of eyes were waiting to see if humans would become conquerors or saviors. He gave a quiet order. The fleet began transmitting a message on every frequency, translated into the alien tongue. The voice that spoke was calm, steady, and unmistakably human. "We came not to destroy your world," it said. "We came to remove those who betrayed peace. Hand them over to the Galactic Council. Let justice be done, and no harm will come to your people." The message repeated every few minutes. It echoed through the cities below, reaching homes, streets, and public screens. Civilians listened. Soldiers listened. Even the rulers hiding in their stronghold heard it. Hours passed, and still there was no reply. On the planet's surface, crowds began to grow larger. Citizens carried banners calling for surrender. Some of the military units joined them, lowering their weapons and refusing to fight. They knew what awaited them if they resisted. The human fleet above could level their entire defense system in seconds. But the humans had not fired a single shot since arriving. That restraint gave everyone hope. Then suddenly the alien rulers made a move. Instead of surrendering, they ordered what was left of their defense network to target the human fleet. Planetary cannons activated, sending bright lines of energy into the sky. The attack hit one of the smaller Terran ships, shaking it badly but not destroying it. Inside the human command ship, the alarms blared. Officers turned to their commander for orders. For a moment, he said nothing. He looked down at the report, then back at the planet below. Finally, he spoke in a calm voice. "Disable their weapons. Do not fire on cities." The fleet moved instantly. Blue light flashed across space as human ships returned fire, but their shots were precise and controlled. Each one struck only military targets, defense grids, missile silos, energy cores. Within minutes, every weapon on the planet was silent. No human ship fired again once the threat was gone. The galaxy watched the entire exchange live. The discipline, the control, the refusal to harm innocents. It left even humanity's harshest critics speechless. No empire in galactic history had ever fought with such restraint and precision. After the planetary defenses fell, the fleet transmitted the same message again. "Hand over those responsible. The fighting can end now." Still, there was no answer. The alien rulers continued to hide, terrified of facing judgment. Their own soldiers began turning against them. The capital city was in chaos, not because of war, but because of truth. Citizens stormed government buildings, demanding that the leaders surrender before Earth was forced to act further. Meanwhile, smaller human ships began moving down toward the atmosphere. They carried no bombs or weapons, only drones for communication and observation. They flew low over cities, projecting messages of peace and safety, telling civilians to stay calm. People on the ground looked up at the glowing ships with awe. Many had expected monsters, ruthless invaders. What they saw instead were quiet watchers, speaking words of assurance. Back on Earth, billions followed every moment through live transmissions. In cities across the planet, massive crowds gathered in squares holding candles and watching the skies through giant screens. The faces of the Peacekeeper and the soldiers now filled murals and banners. Humanity stood united, not in anger but in purpose. The next day, the Galactic Council finally responded. They offered to host a tribunal for the captured alien leaders if Earth managed to bring them in alive. The human commander agreed. The message was clear. No vengeance, no destruction, only justice under the law of all civilizations. The alien leaders, however, still refused to come out. In their panic, they tried to escape the planet aboard hidden transports. But the people caught them. Crowds surrounded their landing zones, blocking their path. Soldiers who once followed their orders now turned them into the local authorities, who contacted the human fleet for help. When the captured rulers were brought to the surface's main spaceport, a Terran landing ship descended quietly through the clouds. It touched down before thousands of onlookers. The hatch opened, and human officers stepped out, calm and silent. They did not raise weapons. They simply received the prisoners, secured them, and nodded respectfully to the crowd. The people of that world watched as the humans lifted off again, carrying their former leaders into orbit. There were no cheers, no celebration, only relief. The war was over. The galaxy had witnessed not just human strength, but human mercy. In the following days, the Terran fleet began helping rebuild what was damaged. They sent engineers to restore power grids and medical teams to assist the wounded. Even the alien civilians could hardly believe it. Those who had every reason to hate them were now helping them heal. The broadcasts of human aid spread fast. Across the stars, stories poured in from traders, miners, and travelers who saw Terran ships delivering supplies and offering help. The galaxy began to understand what humanity truly stood for. They were not conquerors, and they never wanted to be. They were guardians of peace. Peace born from the memory of pain. At the Galactic Tribunal, held weeks later, the captured alien leaders stood trial for their crimes. The evidence was undeniable. The execution orders, the propaganda, the cover-ups. They had wanted to silence a peacekeeper to protect their pride. Now that decision had destroyed their power. When the verdict was read, the entire hall fell silent. The judges declared the leaders guilty, sentencing them under interstellar law. But Earth made one final request, that they be given fair treatment. No cruelty, no revenge. The Council agreed, deeply moved by humanity's restraint. After the trial, a memorial was held in honor of the fallen Peacekeeper. Her image was projected across 1,000 worlds, a symbol of what peace truly meant. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations attended. Even those who had once doubted Earth came forward to express gratitude. The human fleet began its slow journey home. As they passed through the stars, messages of respect followed them everywhere. Planets they had never visited before sent transmissions saying, "Thank you for reminding us what justice looks like." On Earth, when the first ships returned, the entire planet welcomed them in silence once again, not with shouts or parades, but with quiet tears and gratitude. The people knew that this victory was not just military, it was moral. They had proven to the galaxy that humanity's strength was not in weapons, but in the courage to do what was right. The stars would never look at Earth the same way again. Every world now understood that beneath humanity's kindness lay something far greater, a will that could not be broken. The retaliation had ended. The guilty were judged. The innocent were spared, but more than that, a message had been written across the galaxy, brighter than any weapon's fire. A message that said peace is powerful, but only when guarded by those who have the strength to defend it. And that message would echo for generations to come, in every corner of the stars. The war was over, yet its echoes still drifted across the galaxy like faint ripples in deep water. Everywhere the Terran fleet had passed, silence followed, an almost sacred quiet born from awe, not fear. The alien world that once executed a human peacekeeper was now rebuilding slowly. Its skies were calm again, its cities no longer glowing with the light of battle but with the warmth of recovery. The humans had left behind more than supplies and repairs. They had left behind understanding. The alien citizens, once raised to fear and distrust humanity, began to see the truth for themselves. The strangers from the blue planet were not destroyers. They were protectors. And that realization began changing everything. In the capital city where protests had once filled the streets, a new monument was being built. It stood in the main square, made from metal salvaged from both human and alien ships. At its base there were no names, no flags, no symbols of victory, only a single phrase written in dozens of galactic languages. Peace must be defended, even by those who have been hurt. Visitors came daily to see it. Some brought flowers, others simply stood there quietly. A few whispered apologies not to any one person, but to the universe itself, for letting pride and fear cause so much pain. Meanwhile, far away on Earth, the Peacekeeper's story had become part of history. Schools taught about her courage, about how one act of cruelty had united humanity more than any speech or law ever could. Children grew up learning that peace was not weakness, that it required bravery greater than war itself. The Terran fleet that had fought in the retaliation was now scattered across different sectors, assigned to missions of peacekeeping and aid. Wherever they went, doors opened more easily. Old enemies spoke more gently. Even the Galactic Council began to reform its laws, realizing that peace without protection was fragile. But for the humans who had lived through those days, the memories ran deep. They remembered the silence of space before the order to retaliate. They remembered the feeling of sorrow mixed with determination, the realization that justice sometimes had to be carried not by words, but by strength. Back on the orbital station above Earth, the commander who led the fleet stood before a large window, looking down at the glowing planet below. He had seen things that would stay with him forever. The sorrow of innocent lives, the courage of his crew, and the moment when an entire world finally understood humanity's message. He often thought about that peacekeeper, about how her final moments had started something far greater than anyone could have imagined. She had not fought a war, yet her death had changed the galaxy. Sometimes one spark was all it took to light the truth. In the months that followed, Earth received invitations from dozens of alien civilizations. They wanted to sign new treaties, share knowledge, and open trade routes. But more than that, they wanted to learn. They wanted to understand what gave humans such unity and resolve, and so began what came to be called the Age of Shared Peace. The Galactic Council created new laws preventing the execution of peace envoys or civilians, no matter the conflict. Earth became one of its leading members, guiding others through words, not threats. Humanity had earned not dominance, but respect. Still, there were moments of tension. Some empires feared humanity's growing influence. They whispered in their courts, wondering what would happen if Earth ever turned its power toward conquest. But those who had seen the Terran fleet in action knew better. They had seen the restraint, the compassion, and the discipline. They knew humanity had no wish to rule, only to ensure that no one else would suffer the same injustice again. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed in quiet, meaningful ways. Former rival planets began working together. The trade lanes once guarded by battleships were now protected by joint patrols, human and alien officers serving side by side. Worlds that had once refused to talk now sent ambassadors to Earth, eager to learn from the people who had turned pain into unity. And through it all, the memory of that one peacekeeper remained at the heart of it. Every human ship carried a small symbol of her, the insignia of the peace mission that had begun it all. It was a reminder. Justice must never be forgotten and peace must always be earned. One day, many years later, a new ship left Earth's orbit. It was not a warship this time, but an exploration vessel carrying scientists, diplomats, and teachers. Its hull bore a simple phrase along its side, "For peace for all." When the ship entered the galactic broadcast range, millions across the stars watched its launch. It was not armed. It carried no soldiers, yet everyone who saw it understood its meaning. Humanity was still watching the stars, but now it watched not with suspicion but with hope. On one distant world, an old alien historian recorded those events. In his journal, he wrote something that would later be repeated across many worlds. The humans taught us that peace is not a gift. It is a promise, one that must be guarded by courage and guided by compassion. Back on Earth, the people carried on with their lives. Cities were brighter, skies cleaner, and communication between worlds had become part of everyday life. The scars of the past remained, but they served as reminders of what could happen if arrogance replaced understanding. One evening, As the sun set over the ocean, the commander who once led the fleet sat alone on a quiet shore. The waves rolled softly, reflecting the orange glow of twilight. He had retired years ago, but sometimes he still received messages from distant planets thanking him for his leadership, for choosing restraint over destruction. He didn't see himself as a hero. He saw himself as a witness, someone who had seen both the worst and the best of his kind. Humanity had stood on the edge of rage and chosen justice instead. That decision had shaped the future. A gentle breeze passed over the water as he looked at the stars beginning to appear. Somewhere up there were the same worlds he once faced, now allies instead of enemies. The thought brought a quiet smile to his face. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "We did what we had to do, and we did it right." The waves answered with their soft rhythm, as if agreeing. On the alien world where the Peacekeeper's story had begun, the monument in the capital square had become a gathering place for all species. Every year, people came together there to mark the day the war ended. They lit small candles, sang songs of unity, and told stories to their children. Stories not of revenge, but of courage, forgiveness, and hope. One small alien child once asked an elder during the ceremony, "Why did the humans not destroy us when they could?" The elder smiled and replied, "Because they understood something we did not. True strength is not in destroying others, it is in protecting even those who once harmed you." The child nodded, quietly absorbing the words. And so, generation after generation, that lesson continued. The galaxy began to live differently, not out of fear of Earth's might, but out of respect for Earth's heart. In time, the memory of the execution faded into history, but the story of what came after never did. It became a legend told in every language, the tale of how one tragedy awakened an entire civilization to the meaning of peace. The humans, once seen as newcomers to the stars, had become their guardians, not through domination, but through example. And wherever that story was told, the ending was always the same. When they executed a human peacekeeper, they thought Earth would weep and fall silent. Instead, Earth rose, not in hatred, but in unity. And the galaxy learned that day that the greatest weapon humanity ever built was not a warship or a missile, it was conscience. That was humanity's true victory. Not the defeat of an enemy, but the triumph of what it meant to be human. And as the stars glimmered over a peaceful galaxy, one truth remained clear across all worlds. When Earth speaks for peace, the universe listens.